Please join me in welcoming Mark and our panel for our next session.
All right. We're going to try and bring the energy. I don't know. We got some great conversations here, and I was looking at the agenda before, and that was a lot of territory covered. Obviously some AI, a lot on kind of omni-channel strategy, programmatic. That was a nice change up. Omni-channel CX, less is more on strategy. Great talk by Click on kind of overall. What we're going to kind of do is try and bring this together, a little bit of a fireside chat, town hall. I love these kind of formats and we've got really kind of pharma device kind of on the ground. This is what the real world looks like, and this is a great kind of what are the so what's of this. I was trying to think of a joke for continuity of all the opening ones. I am from South Florida, so the temperature's nice, but with a Tommy Bahama shirt and an ocean breeze, it feels a lot different. Anyway, that was the best I could come up with. Mark Bard, Digital Health Coalition. If you're not familiar, would love to connect with people. See a lot of familiar faces, some new faces. I went to this event last year, and I thought it was kind of an interesting crowd because it was definitely some people here that maybe don't attend some of the other digital events or digital marketing or innovation in a broad sense. So it's a great conversation about kind of what's happening. We're going to go through, you see the names up there, and we'll try and save a little bit of time for Q&A, hopefully to make this interactive, get you kind of part of the event. I do have some structured questions, but hopefully if we do this right, I'm not talking a lot, and you can hear from the folks who are doing and talking about their experience. Just real quick for backgrounds, I'll kind of maybe just I'll go in the order of my list. Michel, former Biogen, also spent a lot of time at Lilly as well, so he can bring some of those experiences in. Joyce, we've known each other for a long time, currently at Harmony, also spent some time at CSL, so a great kind of targeted population, rare disease, if you will, or hard to reach populations in some ways. David Murawski, Bayer Radiology, but also has a lot of experience on the media side as well, so can comment kind of some of those bigger picture. And Ryan Krahmer, recently with BMS, currently with Health Influencers, so he's going to bring some of that peer-to-peer insight on what patients are kind of talking about with each other. So what I'd love to do to kick this off before we get into some of the kind of expected questions we're going to go through, kind of the challenges, opportunities, and how we move forward, is I want to start with kind of one piece of advice or key insight related to patient CX that you would offer the audience. And some way to think of this is you've just been asked to come into a room of pharma execs and kind of tell, what is the most interesting thing about patient CX over the next 1 to 2 years? And that could be anything from innovation in general, insights, trials, influencers, communication processes. Let's start with Joyce. How do you answer that question of what's your one key insight piece of advice you would offer on the topic?
I would say it's the KISS theory. Keep
We
it
okay on
simple,
audio?
stupid. To be perfectly honest. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of just rethinking.
Just, find one business problem to solve and focus on that and do it well. And then you can hopefully have some measurable results so you can test and learn, you can prove something out quickly.
Okay.
Don't over-architect it, don't make it take too long. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, just try something, get it in market, and see how it goes.
Test and learn fast. Excellent. Let's go to David. Same question. How would you answer that?
Yeah, I think I would come back to, first of all, I agree with Joyce in terms of keeping it simple and focused. And I would also say we cannot emphasize customer centricity enough, right? And so I'm so glad that we're here having this conference. I'm so glad that the discussion recently is shifting toward customer experience and out of just thinking about channels or omni-channels and so on and so forth. But the reality is in healthcare, not every marketer, not every brand, not every company specifically, but kind of broadly speaking, we've at times done very lousy jobs of communicating with our customers. And so I think one of the things that we can do, and again, to the point of keeping it simple and also staying true to our core principles in healthcare, is really double down on clear and effective, relevant, useful information to our customers, right? And that really should be grounded in what they want to know from us, right? What challenges are they having? What opportunities do they see that our products and services can help them fulfill on their health and wellness journey and wherever they are in that spectrum? But to do that in a real customer-centric grounding and not a brand-centric or a company-centric. And I know that we talk about this a lot and we feel like it's marketing 101, and it is, for a very, very good reason. But I feel like very often when we think about our day jobs and, we see business, goals that we have to achieve, we forget that the business that we're in really is meant to serve customers, HCPs, and the patients that they serve. And if we keep our eyes on that and less about, focused on ourselves, I think we'll do a much better job in anything that we do in the CX space.
Excellent. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but we probably need to figure out if we're doing well at that effort. That probably takes a little bit of feedback from the people that we're talking to.
For sure.
Right? How do we tweak that? Good, we'll come back. Ryan, key piece of advice. You're walking in the room. Tell me about patient CX.
Sure. So I would say that over the past year, I've been talking with patient influencers one-on-one. I feel like I've met hundreds by now. I've been listening to their stories, meeting them online. And I would say the number one thing I would want you guys to take away is that patient influencers want to work with you. They want to be a part of your marketing strategy. And when we're thinking about redefining, the patient experience or the omnichannel patient experience, that's what I envision, and I hope that you envision at some point down the road, is that patient voice on social media is very powerful from a peer-to-peer perspective, and it's also accessible now using patient influencers. So that's what I'll be talking about in this panel, and I just want to thank Mark and Simon for including me.
And when you say influencers, a lot of us think about hiring someone to read a paid script.
Yep.
You're talking about interactive communications and kind of letting that be an actual conversation.
Yeah. So just to kind of level set, I think everyone knows here what a patient advocate is, right? That's someone who has a particular condition and, they might be on a branded website. Patient influencers are specifically patients who have created a social media account. They have around, 1,000 followers, maybe even 100,000 followers, and they specifically post content about their patient journey. So when you're talking about authenticity and trust and really hearing that patient voice, from what I've seen, there's nothing more personal than the scars on someone's bodies. And that's what they're sharing with one another. That's how they're building community, and that's how they're engaging with one another. So those influencers are on social media sharing their patient journeys.
Excellent. Michel, you spent time recently at Biogen, time at Lilly, as we talked about. What's your key insight or advice on patient CX?
I think from my experience is that, getting the right insights is foundational.
Okay.
Understanding their journey, walking the patient's shoes, what's their lived experience like? Because this foundation, and from understanding their journey, tensions, frustrations, unmet needs, then we build from there, because that's the foundation to providing good experiences.
When you say insights, obviously this industry does a ton of market research,
Yeah.
some of it fairly predictable and formulaic.
Yeah.
Do we need to get better with customer insights? Because we seem to have a lot, but maybe we don't have the right customer insights.
In my experience, we've done like ethnographic research. We've done qualitative, quantitative research, but I think it's also the ongoing analysis of the data. So understanding, you have some Qualtrics surveys online, understanding what channels work better than others, working with third parties, behavioral data. It's just about bringing all that information together and using that to make an informed decision, which then also, and I think some of the other presenters talked about this today, is understanding what is it that they're looking for, what kind of information do they need, so that then we can start serving up that information as well.
Excellent. Let's talk pain points for a little bit. I like some of the stuff Ryan was talking about earlier about how do we step back, don't lose the kind of the forest for the trees, kind of this idea of keep it simple, I guess would be in that theme as well. And I was reading something recently, and it was this one guy, you may have heard of him, I won't say the name, but he does electric cars, spaceships, and a bunch of other stuff, and he's also in Pennsylvania a lot recently. I'm always fascinated how this guy does so much across different companies, and one of the things he talks about is every week he goes to each of the companies and looks for bottlenecks and pain points and says, how do we blow these up? How do we do it faster, better, cheaper? And if we kind of think of pain points, what I'd love to do, and I'll keep on you, Michel, for a second here on this idea of pain points, either recent experience or kind of collectively in this industry, we do lose sight of the fact, when we say patient centricity, you can just step back and say, are we really dealing with those major bottlenecks and pain points that are really limiting patient experience? To answer that question, what do you kind of put up there as one of the top ones of, this is what frustrates and drives patients insane?
Yeah. I've been very fortunate throughout my career, having had the opportunity to work in depression, men's health, addiction, MS, SMA. And if you think about some of the most underserved populations, and even for many of us today, one of the big challenges, and especially in rural communities, is the ability to find a doctor. So we talk about engaging doctors and educating doctors, educating patients, but oftentimes a patient doesn't even have a doctor that they can go see.
Just access.
And they're depending on going to an ER room in order to get treated for a very common ailment. So I think that right now that's a major bottleneck, and especially if I did a fair bit of work in addiction medicine, and definitely they do not have family doctors that they deal with, and then they have to deal with, they go see their OSD doctors and when they're getting their methadone treatment. So right now a major bottleneck, at least in my eyes, is to broadening our reach would be access to care.
Excellent. Ryan, what's the big pain point? What
Sure.
creates frustration?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of two-sided right now. I think one is that when we hear the term influencer, we immediately think back to our COVID days and all of the misinformation that has been shared. And so that kind of stigmatization of that, all influencers are kind of sharing a little bit of misinformation. And I would just say every single influencer that I talk to, absolutely does not want to share any type of misinformation. And it's actually the opposite, is that a lot of these influencers vet the partners that they take on, and they actually make sure that everything that they're sharing is scientifically sound. So the Harvard School of Public Communication is actually doing research in this area now, and I would just say stay tuned, because there's some early insights that say if you were to actually invest in patient influencers and actually train them on how to read journal articles and post about scientifically accurate content, they are actually going to go 3 months, 6 months, even a year out, posting accurate content as well. So I would say misinformation is obviously a big topic in influencers, but I want to be here to kind of do some demystifying and saying that's not really the case on the ground from what I've seen.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead, Michel.
Ryan, I think with regards to influencers, I think from a patient perspective, they look at these influencers not only because of the treatments, but more in terms of the beyond the pill, in terms of their lifestyles. And they see themselves in those influencers. And as you touched upon earlier on, it's the credibility. And they will go back and they will follow those influencers and they will refer them to their friends. And I think that, there's a great opportunity in that area. So
Thank you so much. Yep, that's exactly.
Nice. David, pain point.
Yeah, no, my first thought went in a slightly different direction, Mark, which was kind of anchored in my immediate prior role for 5 years previously as a overall marketing lead for one product in a 3-product hemophilia portfolio, so rare disease, but also a digital marketing lead for the other 2, kind of a portfolio aspect. In our particular case, patients with hemophilia and their caregivers are very, very well educated typically. It's a disease that you're typically diagnosed with when you're by 2 usually. And so patients and families, supporting those patients with hemophilia typically tend to be very well educated about their diseases, very well educated about products that are available. There is a very large number of products on the market, and what these patients very often do, their decision-making processes are not necessarily anchored to what my doctor recommends or so on and so forth. It's, what about the people in my community and the experiences that they've had, on drug X versus drug Y. And on top of that, the overall value add that industry players bring to the community. And so I will also say that patients with hemophilia, the hemophilia community is very, very, I would say, highly educated and active. You want to talk about advocacy, it is a very vocal, tight-knit, well-connected group that advocates for itself. So decision-making choices about treatment often come down to, okay, there's a bunch of great products and these people did well on this, these people did well on that. I may be thinking about a change for any number of reasons. What else does your company do for me, right? And so, where I'm going with this is that, I'm working in a space that is very patient-focused, which is not the norm. We even have sales reps or community liaisons that work very closely with patients, patient advocacy groups, so on and so forth. But I'm surrounded by a company that is dominated with products that are not rare diseases, right? That they are very, very high volume, their budgets are much, much bigger, and on top of that, I'm a US-focused marketer. And many of the MarTech and just kind of overall logistics, infrastructure, IT decisions are made in the EU, right? And so the rules of engagement with patients are very, very different in the EU. So on the one hand, my brand has tremendous amount of knowledge and insights and connections to the community that we would want to bring back to our fellow marketers and use data and insights all across the board. And we're often limited by the fact that, we are fighting for, tech stacks, for, CRM, for basic pieces of platform, just support that would allow us to do that, right? Because we're, hearing from, and maybe this is relevant to you. Many of you are probably working for very large global multinational companies, and everyone has a different organizational structure and governance. But you just fight to be able to put, for example, patient data, responsibly, of course, in Viva so that, marketing and sales can more effectively tailor content, use data sets that we have while being told by other people, hey, you can't do patient marketing because they're anchored in a milieu, right? Governmental, political milieu that doesn't allow that, right? A different economic market that doesn't allow that. So it's an interesting pain point for us because we're very forward on our team wanting to, implement and be so customer-centric while also being limited very significantly by our organization. Now, we've made tremendous progress, and what I would encourage you is if you find yourself in that situation, advocate like heck and find other champions who are willing to basically support you to say, I have these customer needs, I believe I have a good plan to solve them, but I'm gonna need this from you and I need your support. So please advocate strong for yourselves, your brands, and ultimately your patients.
So in some ways, the pain points in the company are creating pain points for the patient.
For sure, absolutely. We'd like to be able to communicate more effectively, but
Yeah.
I have to fight twice as hard and either make a decision on my part to reinvest in it or invest in it on the US side, not getting the support globally, right? So.
Yep, excellent. Joyce, when you think pain points, you've been, again, smaller patient populations, sometimes hard to reach. Is it clinical trials, customer experience, just generally getting information? What would you kind of summarize as that key pain point for patient groups?
Well, when you're in the rare space, a lot of people with rare diseases get misdiagnosed for many years. It can take 7 to 10 years to get a proper diagnosis. So they're hunting, they're searching, they're trying to find the right doctors, and they go from specialist to specialist to specialist. It's quite painful and time-consuming. I think our opportunity as marketers and as an industry is to create really good, viable content. I know this was talked about earlier today, but I'm doing a lot of work now with advocacy and actually with our clinical operations team to work to support awareness of clinical trials. The patients we're working with are sometimes literally waiting for the drug to come to market because there may not be another drug. Some cases there's competition, some cases there's not. But the need to still be able to explain, what you're bringing to market, that, health literacy piece, can't be understated. You have to really explain it in simple language. And even when I first started working on some of the clinical trial sites, I was, reading how the protocol was written, and I had to call someone, and I'm like, all right, well, it's this much time for the, the onboarding and the titration period, and then the study period, and the follow-up study, and then the last phase. I'm like, how long, how long are we asking them to be in the clinical trial? Like, just put it in layman's terms. Like, put a graphic that makes it simple for me to understand. Oh, 24 months? Thank you. The 12 weeks plus 52 weeks plus, 17 weeks. They're not there to do math. They're there to try to figure out if you can help them with, a viable treatment, and they have to put their whole, family through a clinical trial, because that's what it takes in some of these cases where you have really rare diseases. You have to take a whole family to a treatment center with you. So anything you can do to make it easy to understand, make it a better experience around finding information, and then anything they need to do to even enroll in a clinical trial, all the concierge services, all that, CX touch, travel, all the things that go with it. You really have to think about that whole ecosystem of what you're offering and how you're putting that information out there, because there are multiple pain points along the way. So you really have to spend time in the patient's shoes, understand the journey, work closely with advocacy. That's critical, because they understand and they can really be a good sounding, board for you. David talked about that too. But Yeah, again, it kind of comes down to that simplicity of knowledge, understanding, touch points, just trying to take all the friction or as much friction as you can out of that whole journey.
Great. So we had some really good examples of the patient pain points. We had a lot of good examples of here's how the company, pharma or device, can start to address some of those. In the time we have left, I wanted to kind of use this to talk about, we've been looking at CX for many years, and it's always been one of the top 3 in pharma. AI obviously is battling for supremacy of what's top of mind, but CX has been always top of mind. Companies seem to be doing a pretty good job with HCP, CX, because they have to. It's a B2B relationship, pretty good with the data sources and feedback loops. We see most struggling, to put it mildly, with patient CX. And then you had this new wave, kind of over the past year, of direct-to-patient is a term we're hearing a lot. You hear a lot of terms like, we want to be hims and hers, right? And if you're not familiar with those, they're DTC companies, not branded, they're typically generic products, but I need a product, and they're very slick, savvy marketing, and they're all lead gen. So we have Lilly Direct launch, and that was kind of a digital front door. We got Pfizer for All, and I think it's safe to say every top 40 company has some project somewhere trying to build a DTP, direct-to-patient effort today. I want to talk about that a little bit, of this idea of, what does this mean for this industry? Because in some ways you could say, well, these direct-to-patient efforts, they're kind of like CX and patient support leveled up. And we just got to do a much better job of doing kind of concierge services. Tell us what you need, and we're going to figure it out for you. So I'll stay with you, Joyce, for a second, and then we'll go to the rest here. What does this mean? Does this apply to rare disease as well? What do you think of some of these digital front door? Are we just oversimplifying this, and these are going to crash and burn for most of the industry? Not to be negative, but takes on this whole direct-to-patient movement.
I think it depends on the therapeutic categories that you're in. Like for some of what my company is supporting, it's specialty pharmacy. So we're never going to be able to do that, Lilly model or the Pfizer model. But for some drugs, you can do that. But I do think that making the process and understanding the process easier. I mean, we've worked very hard with that within the HCP and the MSL and the reimbursement managers. Making that whole process easier for someone to get on therapy, I think, is really important. But a lot of it is just them understanding, like, even what it takes to be on therapy, that that longer treatment, and that it takes a little longer to get to get the therapy, like in my case. So it's a little bit different.
Excellent. Ryan, I'll go to you. And I'm almost thinking in some way, is there some model where you're almost meeting with like a patient? I'm thinking some of those sites have great avatars, right? And it may be based or personalized to you that kind of walks you through the process. Like, any thoughts on this digital front door as we really try and become much more patient-centric, but in a cool marketing, concierge way? Any thoughts on those models?
Yeah, thank you so much. What I would say is the healthcare companies that are most successful in this, in terms of the influencers or working with influencers are just going to be really the face and the voice of what your brand is. And so continuing on, my conversation with the healthcare companies is, what is your specific call to action you want patients to do after they've interacted with this influencer? And if that's not like explicitly clear for that patient to do, you're not going to get those conversion rates. So what I've seen is the most successful healthcare companies, including these direct-to-consumer, direct-to-patient companies, is that they have a seamless process, starting with that advertisement in New York City. If anyone's in New York City, you see them all over the subways, the Row and the Hims and Hers. You can go to that QR code, and that is a very seamless process. What I would say is any healthcare company that wants to use influencers, I would encourage them to say, yes, let's think about the influencers, but let's think about the whole journey that you want that patient to take, and what is that end result, so we can track that all the way through.
Yeah. David, thoughts on this kind of CX level up direct-to-patient movement?
I think it's really interesting and exciting. Not super familiar with those two very specifically, just not having direct experience either ordering from or working for, but I think it's a natural evolution. And I think that without a doubt, while healthcare companies and pharma companies should not stray too far from their core areas of expertise, fundamentally, so many other industries around us are doing the whole of the customer experience much better than we are. right? And they also, quite frankly, they have the data infrastructure, they understand how to speak and communicate effectively and segment customers and use data. And they see, without a doubt, the opportunity that is existing in healthcare. And if we don't do it, right, and I completely agree with Joyce, it depends on the therapeutic area. This will not be possible for all drugs. And obviously, Pfizer and Lilly can do a lot more than a startup can, just based on financial resources and the overall organization. And maybe not, right? But just by virtue of resources and size that they possibly could invest if it makes sense. But this has been going on in other industries for a while now. I mean, the lab companies have basically gone from 15 years ago, not having a lot of direct access to the big players like Quest Diagnostics and LabCorp, as well as some boutique labs. Make it very easy. Like, I can order a lab test, not every single lab test, but I can order a cholesterol screen from my phone today. And basically, using an app at one of the big players, can look up, I can order a panel, I pay out of pocket. If there is a gating, with a physician due to state law, telehealth will solve that issue for me, and I can be directed to a lab where I can get, again, depending on the specimen type, but let's say, blood, can't do that at home, right? But I could be directed, here are all the collection sites in your area, which are not just the brick and mortar of those laboratories, but are increasingly becoming places like Costco and Walmart, who are offering additional services, right? You can get your blood drawn, if I want to monitor my cholesterol more frequently than my payer or, just regular cycle with my doctor allow, I can do that at Walgreens and get a flu shot, or do it in Costco and do shopping and get the flu shot and have my blood drawn. And I will get those results back on my app 2 days later, whereas in the old days, it used to be your doctor will call you. If it's not an emergency, you're going to hear from him or her in about a month through a really lame customer portal in Alien, and I say Alien based on the coding, right, because this is a 45-year-old EHR, right? So think about the difference between those two experiences. And so I think it's a natural evolution, and if we don't start seeing first and then seizing the opportunities where we can, other industries around us are encroaching right now, and they're going to step in.
Michel, some final thoughts. You started this discussion off by saying better customer insights.
Yes.
Right? And if we really are asking them what they think and getting honest feedback about the current process, we got some pretty big gaps. So are we able to build that digital front door?
Well, I want to go back to Joyce's comment, and I agree 100% with her. Not every therapeutic category. This is not going to work for everything. But if I put myself in a patient or in Lily's shoes, as from a patient perspective, if I am able to reach out to a pharma company, they facilitate the interaction today with a physician, but ultimately, maybe and eventually, they're facilitating an introduction with a specialist or some beyond, like the broader circle of care, a physiotherapist and the like, and they're taking care of me. There is no way that I'm ever going to switch off that Lilly drug. I'm going to have so much loyalty for that customer, for that company, that even if a pharmacist says to me, hey, Michel, we're going to switch you to this generic, or I'm going to pay that copay because of that experience. And we all know that if an individual has a positive customer experience with a company, they're much more loyal. So I think that from a patient perspective, I think it's fabulous what they're doing. Secondly, from a Lilly perspective or a Pfizer perspective, think about all the data that they're getting. We talked earlier on about non-personal promotion becoming new personal promotion. Imagine all the data that they have on these customers today, and then combining that with claims data. So I think that what we see today with Pfizer for All and Lilly Direct is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of everything that is happening below the water. And I think that there's a lot of interesting and amazing things that are going to come up from that.
Yeah, and I love that example of you're going to get the more data, better data, and then you can start to control people that go through this experience, from a compliance, adherence, everything else down the road. Are we getting a better outcome from this investment? Because historically, it's really hard to get that investment outside of DTC dollars.
I agree.
In these programs.
And it'd be interesting to see how a patient who has gone through the Lilly Direct program and what their adherence looks like 6, 12, 18 months, and then an individual who has gone through a non-Lilly Direct program.
Excellent.
And the president of Eli Lilly, David Ricks, was a market researcher in Canada.
Yep.
So, he asked tough questions.
Yeah. Excellent. So we are technically over.